Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today, guys. I really appreciate you taking the time to do so. And while we are saying thank you, I do, of course, want to thank our sponsors as well, who you can see on the screen. And I do believe we have a second slide of those as well. We have got some of those gold sponsors too. Now, moving into what we're going to be talking about here today, the question is, how can we help? Looking at those workplace generations. So my name is Hannah Ballard, and I'm here with my colleague Helen Agor. And before we go into a little more of a detailed introduction about who we are specifically, we do want to tell you a little bit more about the company we've come from.
So as Hannah has already said, my name is Helena, and we are from Changing Social. We're a Microsoft partner focusing on the people side of digital transformation. We help organizations adopt new ways of working through world-class automation and change management strategies to help them realize the full capabilities of Microsoft 365. The purpose of this talk is to raise awareness that can all become part of the digital transformation journey by I don't think that even makes sense as a sentence. I'll keep going anyway. Part of the digital transformation journey by volunteering to become a digital champion. So we're here to talk about digital champions. So the question we have is, how can we help you help?
Absolutely. And who am I to be asking you this question? Just another millennial taking up space. Well, I am a millennial, but actually I'm here because I'm really interested in hearing more from you, from everybody in the room, as we have so much collective knowledge here. And a little bit about what I do specifically at Changing Social. I am what we call a Digital Champions Community Manager. So I work with our clients on that Digital Champions journey, that program, and I am so fortunate because it means I get to work. I think I've worked with up to over 3,000 different digital champions across 17 organizations in 6 months that I've been with Changing Social. So I am super enthusiastic about learning more about you, what you have to offer, but also how we can help that knowledge be shared with everybody.
Thanks, Hannah. And my name is Helen Agor. I'm an adoption and change consultant. And I often say this, I'm so old that I actually started life in an office that had a real typewriter and filing cabinets in it. And in that time, I went through the journey of DOS and every single version of Microsoft Office. I work as an adoption and change consultant, I work with clients to work on their overall strategy for digital transformation. And one of the things that I do a lot of work in is use case scenarios, so scenario success with use case leads. Often those use case leads come out of the digital champion programs. And it's those use case leads that drive further change through the organization.
Now, I'm afraid I am so used to being in Teams meetings and calls, and I do love those reaction functions, especially hands up. So, we'd like to take you through the generations. Have a look on the screen now. Who do you identify with? And I'd actually like to see, through a show of hands today, what generations have we got in the room with us? But before we do that, there is a generation not on the screen who I think Helena would appreciate if we gave a little nod to today.
Yes, the traditionalists. For those, apparently there's only 2% in the workforce. They're the silent generation. And if anyone from the silent generation is in this room, please put your hand up. If not, I'd just like to give a huge nod to that generation, that I hope they're enjoying a well-earned rest, having worked hard for the last goodness knows how many years.
Absolutely. But back to who we have in the room. So let's get started with the baby boomers. So we have one here, my absolutely fantastic colleague, Helena. And I can see we have somebody in the room as well. So well done.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Next, we have Generation X. So that is my parents' generation. I'm a big fan. We've got a few in the room with us. Fantastic, brilliant. And then we're on to Millennials. So that's me. I can see we're taking up the room today. Fantastic. And then lastly, we have Gen Z. We have one fantastic Gen Z in our organisation. I am related to a couple more. Great to have everybody here, and it is lovely to see the mix that we've got in the room as well, and how actually there's so much potential for us to work together already.
Indeed, and I think the thing to remember about generations is that whatever was going around us at the time in the world will have certainly formed us, particularly things that happened in childhood around the age of 10. Now, when you get down to that, of course, we've all had our own year of being 10, but we collectively form this social construct of a generation. But those things can have a massive impact on how we view the world in general. From there, we then start learning a bit more about how we joined the workforce and the ways in which business was done, the ways in which we related to older and younger generations, and that has changed considerably. Now, one of the things that we have is we have a number of statements or quotes that are the most quoted by each generation. So here we have the baby boomers, and I'm ashamed to say that actually I identify with that statement, I deserve better. Meanwhile, Gen X, her favourite is reality bites. Don't know if that lands with anybody in that generation. And millennials.
We see a wealth of opportunity here. Life is a buffet. We are no longer looking at structure and one route like maybe our parents did through places like university and our direct course of our career even. But we now start to see an opportunity to really pick and choose what we want to learn about and what we want to do.
This hurts. When I see this, I am coping and hoping, and I think for Generation Z coming into the workplace, and particularly in the pandemic, whereas some of the older generations, it was actually a relief not to have to battle through the traffic yet again for another decade, and there was that real opportunity of just taking stock and settling. For the youngest generation, of course, it's been a huge challenge to deal with being on one's own in the workplace when actually all you want to do is learn and get connected with as many people as possible in the workplace. So feel your pain. And what we've got here is, as we said earlier, the traditionalists. We've still got a few hardcore traditionalists in the workplace. Amazing. Baby boomers. Now, although in the States there are 10,000 retiring every day or every week, maybe day actually, 65% plan to work beyond the age of 65 or retirement age, which is not insignificant, because if they're staying there, what impact will that have on the younger generations?
And then we have Gen X coming in, so taking over from the baby boomers very soon. And as I said, this is my parents' generation, and they are known for being those hard workers, grafting. So soon we are going to see them taking over from the baby boomers, and if the baby boomers are still there, as you said, I wonder what impact that will have in the way that we work and learn together. And then we have millennials. So we are now, as we saw in the room with the show of hands, actually making up the largest living generation, and the most of the workforce at the moment as well. And we'll probably start seeing that trend of people coming from those shop floor, those ground floor working roles into management positions, into positions where they can start affecting change as well. So we are up and coming at the moment, and definitely life is a buffet. We are definitely excited to do it.
However, we have 2 billion Zoomers, Generation Z, and you're entering the workforce. What's fascinating is how Generation Z are choosing to bypass further education and coming straight into the workplace. What impact is that going to have on those youngest millennials who've chosen to stay in further education? What's going to happen? Who are they going to be managed by? Are they going to suddenly find themselves being managed by Generation Z, who've been in the workplace longer and have more work experience? These are questions we're asking, and is very much why we ended up having these conversations and why we're here today to talk about workplace generations, because we found each other in our organisation, loved the way each other thought, and wanted to work together. So we found this to do, which meant that we had the opportunity to ask loads of questions.
I mean, it was basically an opportunity to hang out. We love talking to each other, and we've only met twice in person, with this being the second time. So
we're still trying to work out how to walk around each other instead of being separate windows.
We're having lots of fun, I promise.
Last year, I actually spoke at the Scottish Summit about workplace generations, and I called the talk "Mind the Generation Gap." And the reason I started the research in the first place was, as the token baby boomer at Changing Social, I just did not know how these millennials worked. It was like they were foreign creatures, and I was completely at sea with the way they worked. And the fascinating thing is, you know, from a baby boomer who was very much someone who thought up my ideas and started drafts on my own and worked things on my own, to have this group think and this group work ethic, I found really strange. And I realized it was my pride that was keeping me apart from them. And once I put my pride down and stepped into that process of working out loud, the whole world just woke up. I found that I could write a dodgy first draft in public, and I got crowdsourced help in that document. I got recommendations and suggestions, and have you thought of this, and what about this piece of research? And instead of that stressful moment at the last minute when I had to get something out to someone else, I already had a lot of information in place. And so that was an absolute eye-opener. So anyone from baby boomer generation or Gen X, have a go at engaging with work earlier, and I think you'll find that all sorts of magic happens.
Absolutely. And as you can see on the screen here, we're coming back to that question, how can we help? And we're both really big fans of Brené Brown and the way that she does her research, both qualitative and quantitatively. So we decided to do our best to emulate that and do our own research as well. So we've been asking these questions back to a wide range of people across industries to ask them questions about their technology journey. Where are they at? But also, how has the pandemic shaped the way that they interact with technology? And has it actually leveled the playing field in terms of how we all use technology together? Now, what you can see here is a timeline of technology, and I can definitely say from personal experience, where I hit here, born in 1994, those communication technologies were coming into their own at that time, especially with social media. So I know we've got a lot of millennials. I was an avid MSN user, big fan of MySpace, yeah, all of that. So absolutely, although we grew up with technology, we weren't born into it. We had to learn those things that were coming out around the time we were growing up. And absolutely, I think your journey was ever so slightly different to mine.
Yes, I got crayons when I was the same age as Hannah was when she got Instant Messenger. I think it was really interesting. We were out with friends last night, friends of mine, because I live in Glasgow, and Hannah was up. And one of them is Gen X, and he was ranting about how his children, his millennial children or Gen Z children, don't answer the phone. And of course, it's that thing where we've got these amazing devices, but what, you mean they're a telephone? Whereas for me, everything was always that response to something's ringing. And the friend was ranting that he was trying to recruit people for his hotel business, and he would ring all these millennials and Generation Zs, and none of them would pick up their phone. And eventually, when they rang back, he said, "Why didn't you answer the phone?" "Oh, we don't do that. We do everything differently." So I think communication is a significant thing to think about when it comes to this.
And I think, I don't know about you guys, but I get more scam calls than I do actual phone calls nowadays, so I can appreciate the aversion.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about now, and actually I'm not going to talk about now because it's a different conversation, but it's around communication, not just through telephony or communication, but also how we consume news. And I think whereas before we've all grown up differently with the way in which we focus on news, but it is something that I want to take into further research. Because I think what the pandemic has done is suddenly taken us all to a different way of keeping up to date. That's for another talk, so hopefully we'll be able to talk about that.
We just want to hang out a little bit more. I'm sure a few of you recognise Pusheen. Pusheen's actually been around since 2013 and comes from Facebook. But here she is, still relevant today, doing her thing.
I have to say, thanks to Microsoft 365 stock images, you will find her in the cartoon section, if you're wondering. So I think what we wanted to talk about now was the whole thing about technology and how the different generations have come to it. And I think with the silent generation, my mum, she's 81 now and amazing, but she does ring me to ask me how to get onto Netflix. And I worked it out that what I needed was a photograph of her TV remote. And so every time she asks, what I do is I send her the picture of the TV remote with a circle round the button that says Netflix on it.
Well, I don't want to say that that is just a generational thing because my sister is Gen Z, she's 6 years younger than me, and I still have to set up her printer. And last time I visited, she was complaining about her brand new laptop running so incredibly slowly, and I asked her, when was the last time you turned it off? She hadn't. She had so many browser tabs open, she'd left that laptop on pretty much permanently since she'd got it, and had no idea that that would actually impact how her laptop was running, essentially. But on the other hand, my family, over lockdown, decided to stay in touch with the WhatsApp group. And we had 3 generations. So we had my gran, my uncles, and my dad, and my siblings, who are both younger than me, on this WhatsApp group, all checking in with each other, all communicating effectively together across the generations through this WhatsApp. But my nan is a bit of an exception. Her favourite TV show is The Walking Dead. And I don't know why, but she's so invested in keeping up with the times and having her wall-mounted TV playing Walking Dead whenever it's out.
I think the thing around generations and technology, if you think about it, Generation Alpha coming along behind Generation Z, they will have had technology right from the get-go. They'll probably have had smartphones taking pictures of them on a daily basis. And if you think about the generations that will top the workplace, baby boomer for now, Generation X, I think that way in which technology, in which the different generations will interact with each other will be similar. Obviously, the younger generations will find something that the older generations are not interested in or have no ability to get into, and the older generations will eventually be left behind, like every other generation that has gone before us.
Absolutely. And what happens if we do huddle in our generation? We are so used to gathering ourselves with our peers of those same age ranges. I know that generally socially at work, we tend to group with those people we identify with. But actually, what does that look like, and what does that mean in terms of how we can collaborate and work together to produce something great?
And I think the thing about huddling together in a generation, just to think about it, makes it very easy to point the finger at another. So, for instance, older generations might point and say, you know, we did it this way, why are you doing it that way? The younger generations point at us to say, why have you ruined the planet? And I think that we have a spectrum of finger pointing that goes right from the mild to the extremely serious. However, what we're trying to do is look at how we can help from our generation. And I think what really makes a difference is where we start looking at how we view the younger generation. So we asked some questions in our questionnaire, and we got some of these answers.
Absolutely. And for the baby boomers, it was social media pressures. Of course, they are the first technological immigrants, those people who weren't born into technology and had to learn about it at a much older age. So feeling that pressure to get on board, how do you communicate with your children, with your grandchildren, if they rely so heavily on things like Snapchat for communication? My sister at one point would only respond to Snapchat, and I kind of aged out of that at that point, so we didn't get to talk very much. But you can imagine how much pressure they may feel to actually stay in touch with family if they have to then relearn a new piece of technology to do so.
And I think from a baby boomer's perspective, looking down, our social media was a case of picking up that infernal telephone, or, goodness, writing a postcard. I used to write to my friends on postcards and put them in the post box, and they'd arrive at the other end. And I've still got some of them, and they're just ridiculous. But it was slow communication. So for us, when we look at the younger generations permanently attached and the anxiety that seems to cause, I feel helpless. I feel helpless. What can I do to help with that sense of connection? Because it seems to be connection, it says there, distinguishing online personas with reality. How do we get people into a room? Well, we've got the opportunity now because the pandemic has sort of changed things for us. But equally, we're really aware that what happens for the younger generations, is it for the best? Do we worry unnecessarily? Or are we actually, is it a good idea to worry about the younger generations? What can we do to help hold on to some of that analog world that we grew up in?
Absolutely, and I'll let you in on a secret. I don't think I've ever told you this. I love postcards, and I actually collect them. So there is still a love of analog technology out there for us millennials, at least if it's just me holding the torch for postcards, at least. But absolutely, distinguishing our online personas with reality. I'm sure the millennials in the room can relate to this. We weren't born into technology. We grew up with the rise of things like Instagram and social media, where this is almost predominantly a visual form of communication as well, something completely different to what old school Facebook was like. And we do then have to separate what are we putting on social media with who we are as a person. And I think that is a skill that we can all benefit from as well.
I think also when we start bringing this into the workplace is how we communicate with one another in the workplace. So if you've got the younger generations who are very comfortable communicating on social media, and every time someone mentions LinkedIn to me, I feel like a very small dog being dragged to the vet. Do I have to use this? And actually what's been fantastic is we've got Yammer in our organisation. We also roll it out to clients. And so I am a real believer that we walk the walk. If we're going to help clients adopt new technology, it's something that we have to use so that we can talk about it authentically. And I have found it absolutely fantastic to connect with the different communities we have in our organisation. And some of them are Microsoft 365, did you know? We have other ones which are the training team. We've got Changing Social Music, the Reading Corner. We've got all these different communities that sit there, and I've sort of gradually made my way into these different communities, and I have started to communicate and show who I am. In the past, when I first started with work, it was always the work persona and nothing else. And it was that thing of taking myself off into my private life, into my home life, and that was where I could be Helena. And I think things have really changed.
It's really interesting, actually. As part of our research, Helena introduced me to somebody called Rachel Ficardi, who has done a lot of writing on this subject. And one of the things that she has observed is how the older generations separate who they are at work and at home. They're essentially different people. They bring nothing with them to the office. Whereas millennials, Gen Z, we are authentically ourselves. We bring everything with us, and we're quite happy to share it with everybody. And I can definitely say, I can't believe you haven't mentioned it already, the Yammer group called CS Gaming revealed to me that Helena actually likes playing Zelda on the Switch, and We've both brought our switches with us, and I'm going to be helping with some boss battles later.
Put it this way, I go around collecting all the hearts and all the, kit and everything, and then I have to hand my switch over to someone to battle the big bosses because I simply can't do it. So multi-generations in the workplace, solving problems, we love it. One of the things that we really want to do is we can sit here and point the finger at one another and find our generation wanting. But actually, ultimately, what we have discovered is that when we asked the generations what attributes they had, we got some fantastic answers. And I'm glad to say that we all have a good sense of ourselves. So when we think of the baby boomers, the attributes that we have, that we are patient, some of the time, calm, good listeners. We've got the benefit of that lived work experience. And if we can slow down and give time to the younger generations to hear the challenges that they face, the likelihood is we might have a good idea, something that we experience that we can bring into the present day and modernize. For me, I don't need to be in charge, and I think that's quite interesting. You get the baby boomers, we're not all at the top of the tree. I have millennial bosses. However, I do come every day thinking, how can I be of service? I have all this lived experience. I can use Microsoft Office. One of the things, I was actually an IT trainer for years, so I used to deliver 2-day Excel courses in the 1990s. And so I happen to know all of Excel into the corners, and Word and PowerPoint, Microsoft Office. However,
I don't.
Sorry.
I don't. So I am a trainer. I teach people how to use M365. I don't know how to use Excel. I do know, however, how to do a pivot table, because I once needed to use a pivot table. And that is just a fantastic example of what kind of the learning culture has become for those younger generations. We didn't experience Excel at its birth, at its conception, and grow with it with our learning. We now have so much that there is there to learn. We decide what is going to be of benefit to us, and we pick that. I can build you a Power App. I probably can't give you a pivot table right now. I've probably forgotten. But I wanted a Power App, so I taught myself, and now I have an app. So
for those of you in the room who have had really, really thorough training, remember that the tools you use and don't even think about are probably the ones that some of the younger generations would really benefit from. You have worth as a digital champion at that moment, where you can suggest these really useful ways of working that will save people time.
I can be honest, you have actually taught me quite a few things recently, because I had no idea how to use the basics.
We have this great thing when we do internal training. We have a leaderboard. And the leaderboard, you add the feature of the tool that you've never heard of before, and you put your name against it. And other people can put their name against it as well. And that leaderboard comes out at the end of, this is what I learned. The winner is the person who learned the most. And it's amazing how people enjoy using that technique in a learning environment. There isn't a sense of shame for not knowing. There's a real incentive to gather and to take away as much new knowledge as possible in that moment.
Absolutely. It's a really good example of the idea that I am not my work. So there is no shame in failure. There's no shame in learning through getting something wrong. And I think it's something really important for us all to remember, is that if we can separate our value from our work, then we are going to be open to learning, we're going to be open to feedback, and again, being open to learning from other generations' experiences as well.
And I think that's the thing that Hannah has been teaching me. And I love the fact that for me, my worth was caught up in my work. And as a result of working with Hannah, I have been able to disconnect that and realize that I have inherent worth. And actually, making a mistake is okay. It's along with my pride. I've learned a lot recently, mostly about my shortcomings, but I have found that as a consequence of learning about those things, I've been able to turn that learning into something really helpful.
Absolutely. And now talking about Gen X, so as I said, I have Gen X parents, and I have watched them and their life kind of grow from where I was obviously old enough to observe. And absolutely, when it comes to things like being entrepreneurial, my parents throughout their life have been self-employed. They have been those entrepreneurs for me. And also in terms of pioneering that work-life balance, finding that balance between both of them. And obviously nowadays, there's so much more opportunity to bring your work home with you as we are through those digital communications. So we definitely have opportunities to learn here from Gen X and how we can create that balance. But something that I found absolutely fascinating is the fact that Gen X parents, the parents of Gen X, had such a structured way of being that it influenced Gen X into a much more free-thinking way of parenting. And they are the reason that Millennials and Gen Z are the way they are now, those free-thinking, freestyle, less structured people by nature. And then we have our millennials. And there we go, prime example, openness to being wrong. I absolutely have no worries about messing up in front of you. I'm quite open to my shortcomings in front of everybody right now. But we're also compassionate and open-minded. And again, that reflects, I don't have to worry about making a mistake because we're a generation of compassion and who are open-minded. And to quote one of our respondents when we asked this question out to our peers, one response we got was that also dashing, like Clark Gable with a keyboard.
I'm very impressed that a millennial actually knows who Clark Gable is, of course, in this given incident.
And then lastly, we have Gen Z. So again, we're seeing that theme of openness, friendly, approachable, and open-minded in the way that those Gen X parents have influenced us. And then you can see here again, we've got a quote from one of our respondents, and I think this is absolutely fabulous. And I've already heard this almost verbatim from somebody in the room today, and being appreciative of lessons and learning from other generations, but also being willing to teach alongside the learning, that give and take relationship between what we have to offer.
We also asked about help. And I think one of the things that at Changing Social, we have our digital champions as a service. And within that, it's all about help. And Hannah, being the community manager, I'm sure you have lots to say about this.
Absolutely. So as part of my role day to day, I support and facilitate people asking for and providing help. And there are so many different ways you can interpret help. I think it's such an interesting concept. So you can see here the questions that we have asked. But actually, when it comes to these different interpretations of what help is, we then need to look at how we're providing it through more than one channel. So we have a place within our Digital Champions community on Teams called Ask the Expert. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody has to go and ask their subject matter expert on a particular topic. It's actually building a robust community where you can go and ask questions yourself and be supported by your peers. Of course, they have their community managers for backup if they have any more technical questions, and we can obviously then guide them to those resources. But we also have self-paced learning. We also have video recordings and live webinars. If you need help, it might not look the same to you as it does to someone else, and it is really important that we create those routes, make help available and accessible for everybody.
Absolutely. What was interesting about the research is that Generation X, you like to find your own help, and in having these communities, you're more likely to go and look for the help within the organisation rather than start Googling and using YouTube. And the problem that happens at that point is that you've got the danger of missing out the governance that actually surrounds certain activities within your organisation. So it's really encouraging anybody who wants to learn for themselves to go to particular areas within the organisation. You've got Microsoft Learning Pathways, or you've got SharePoint that will take you and list out what the rules are, what the regulations are, what the policies are for your organisation.
And the question here is, what happens if we bring each generation into the present? We bring those experiences together from all of the different life experiences that we've had. And there's actually a story I really want to tell, and I think here is where I'm meant to be telling it. But essentially, I was so fortunate to be in a room, a virtual room, a Teams call, with some brilliant people, some senior people from Microsoft, some people who had lived through being displaced through the Bosnian conflicts, and these people were coming together to say, we need to do something really important right now. Now I was there with my managing director at Changing Social, with these people who had obviously got this brilliant idea, and I was sat in the room going, oh my goodness, what do I do? How have I been invited into this room of amazing people? And I think my manager recognized that. He messaged me through a Teams message and said, go on, get your elbow in, you can do it, you have worth here. And that was something I needed from him. And absolutely I can contribute. I know that I'm good at what I do, otherwise I wouldn't be in that room with them. But it actually took somebody else going, I recognize this and I really want to help and push you into the conversation. And that is what we need. We need that help getting in the room, especially as millennials and Gen Z coming into this space for the first time, potentially in influential positions.
And I think at this point, there are, all the time that I've been studying and reading about workplace generations, these are the things that I really want to say. As a baby boomer who's obviously ancient, and I've got all these amazing generations following me, is to my fellow baby boomers that we need to stand back and let the younger generation in. They have fantastic ideas. And the danger is we could sit in our bell jar and talk amongst ourselves, and we will be the poorer for it. For Gen X, we love that you find the answers to things outside the organisation. I've already said that. But do please have a look at what's on the inside of in your SharePoint. The likelihood is you'll get a better answer there than out there in the free-for-all. Millennials, I'd love it if you gave us more time in your company to let us in, so that we can appreciate your ideas, we can learn this group work together, that we can, so I put down my pride, which allowed me in, but let's just say I'm shy or I'm not as demonstrative. As millennials, you could invite the older generations in. It would make a massive difference. And Gen Z, I want to be challenged by you. I want you to stand up to me and my overinflated ideas, and I want to hear what your ideas are. It's really easy to hear the words "you're right" too many times and to start believing it. If our ideas aren't good enough, challenge us with yours. Because you're the future, you're going to take us forward. And I think if we look at the shapes on the screen, if we work together as a collection with the lived experience, with the enthusiasm, with the understanding of automation, with that entrepreneurial spirit that Gen X brings, we really could achieve digital transformation. If we work together and learn together how to do things a certain way that suit our organisation, we get everyone on the same page. We want to give space for innovation. We have something called the Design Shed at Changing Social, and it's a place for madness.
It has a reputation.
But the purpose of that Design Shed is proof of concept. And like any good idea, far better to give an idea oxygen in the first instance. If it blows up and doesn't go anywhere, then at least it's been explored, rather than shutting down those ideas. Make space for innovation, make space for ideas, invite every generation into that moment. Satisfaction in a job well done, shared across the organisation. And of course, the making of unlikely workplace friendships, really facilitated through lockdown with Yammer communities and ways to connect with one another when we didn't have that opportunity to meet by the water cooler.
And what happens when we actually do come together and lift the bell jar? We can start to create an ecosystem. We can create that symbiotic relationship of knowledge sharing and, gaming sharing as well.
Progress. But ultimately what we're looking to do is to bring that ecosystem to life within our organisation, to find a way of walking forward and making sure that that digital transformation can be achieved by all of us for the good of our organisation and beyond.
And this is where we want to leave you with a question. How can we help? I've worked personally over the last 6 months with, just check the numbers, 3,850 individual digital champions across 17 different organisations. And we really have an opportunity to help lift that bell jar together. I do want to say as well that we do have the opportunity, I believe, for questions. And we are going to be around after this session if you would like to continue this conversation with us, because I promise you we will not stop talking.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask or any comments they'd like to make about the idea of collaboration across a workplace organisation? Yes.
When you deal with your network of champions, is it predominantly one-to-one or is it group sessions?
Thank you for that question. So the question is, do we work on a one-to-one basis or across a group of champions? That's definitely one for you.
So that's exactly what I do. So we structure it to enable lots of different learning paths. So we deliver webinars and everybody is invited to those. So we're delivering that training. There is the opportunity for interaction throughout those sessions where people can ask questions related to the topic, or they can even raise questions that we will then follow up with them. But we also have a channel for each of these communities called Ask the Expert, and this is where they can post questions and look for that peer-to-peer support. So actually we're creating an environment where peer-to-peer support is far more effective, and they then have a resource to go back to. But it also means that we can see those questions being asked, guide them to the right place, provide maybe a one-to-one call with a champion where we think we can really add some value as well. And I actually have a call with one of our digital champions next week who has some specific questions and things I can help with. So absolutely, it does range, but there is always the opportunity for those one-to-ones where we can add that value as well.
I think the other thing about the digital champions is not only are they learning the products, the Microsoft 365 products, but they're learning soft skills to help tell the story. So if you've got someone in an organisation who's interested in bringing technology to life, Microsoft 365, they can learn about the product, but then they can learn about storytelling through, say, PowerPoint, or they might want to know, they might learn about how to influence people. And what we're doing is we're giving those digital champions the opportunity to acquire those skills so that they can then take that knowledge out into the organisation.
Have you got any good tips in terms of promoting interaction and feedback when you're dealing with a large group of people? So if you've got a group of 10, 15 people, naturally you're going to get a couple of people who are more vocal in the group. You mentioned earlier about it took your manager to give you a push to contribute within that call.
So your question is, how can we
encourage the
feedback and interaction from the digital champion community? A couple of things there. One of the things is an adoption and change management consultancy. We use ProSciADCAR, which is the change management framework, and that stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. So that desire piece, what's in it for me, and also any resistance is very good for getting that, keeping an eye on where we're going with engagement. The ability of measuring things on the metrics through the Microsoft 365 admin dashboards. We'll also see whether there's been an uptick in whatever we have been delivering. And then from that, it goes back into the community. Over to you.
Absolutely. And in terms of our interaction within our communities, we have communities ranging from 50 people up to 500. And we want that interaction, so we make sure that we dedicate our time to actually driving that. And one of my colleagues, Stacey, she's based in the US, she's phenomenal. I don't know how she does it. And I asked her the other day, and she actually said, treat it like social media. and actually get those clickbait posts and ask those questions. And she has this wonderful way of communicating, and she gets people excited. So we have leaderboards when you complete a challenge. So we ask, based on the learning we've been providing at that point in time, to go and complete a challenge, show us that you've learned that skill, and you get 50 points for it. She has incentivized her champions that she works with through that leaderboard in an absolutely insane way. She's brilliant at it. But that incentive, that leaderboard, has really influenced how driven people are to really engage with us and show their learning, not just absorb it, but let us know that they have actually used it.
Any other questions? Does anyone else have anything they'd like to ask? In that case, I'd like to just thank our sponsors again, and to say thank you very much to Microsoft, the event sponsor, our platinum sponsors, and also our gold sponsors. We really appreciate you coming today, and if anyone has got any questions they'd like to ask us afterwards or connect, we will be here just outside for a while. We'd love to continue this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you very much.